Yeah. Well, welcome everybody. This is Dwayne Newsitter, Tony Trusselt, and today we have a very special guest joining us on Tree Actions, the Human Forestry podcast. And today we have Wenda Li from, I guess, I don't even know if it's fair to say Toronto, Wenda. I don't want to pick the wrong city, but is Toronto correct?
Yep, I'm right in the smack center of Toronto.
Wow. So there you go. We've got our first tree actions taking place from Toronto, Canada with Wenda Li. So Wenda, it's a human forestry podcast. I told you a little bit about it at the show. And I don't remember if we did a little mini session with you at the show, did we?
No.
No, no, we never
Oh,
did
we
get an
didn't. We
opportunity.
didn't. We didn't. We didn't get to that. Okay, so that's okay because we did a few people at the show in that way. But I'm really excited to have you join us. And really, we just talk about our experiences in the tree care industry and kind of being part of what we're sort of calling the human forest. And, your story is a very, well, it's an inspiring story to me. And I think to many people. And I know that you're getting more requests and you're sharing it more and more. So maybe you just want to give us an overview of even how it actually first started. How did you find yourself in the trees?
Well, I've always been attracted to trees. I'm the quintessential tomboy growing up in the suburbs of Toronto, and I'd be climbing like what I know now, where like honestly newly planted Austrian pines, and as a small
Wow.
kid, just because it was like a ladder. Um,
Yeah.
so that was the initial attraction, and it just grew into in high school I had an opportunity to do a 3-week intensive sort of like a wilderness experience with Outward Bound Canada, and that blew my mind apart. Just up in spending, like, I was 17, never went camping before, never slept in a tent, never canoed in my life, and then I went on this course that it was completely nature immersed. And at the end of the course, I realized I need to do something after, like, with my career, to do with trees. And that led me to get a degree in forestry, which was a big disappointment because, back in the 80s, if you wanted to do anything with trees, the guidance counselor would say, "Oh, you're going into forestry," not knowing that forestry was pulp and paper, and clear cuts, or you go into wildlife ecology. And
Right.
I managed to get through my degree, but I really was not like going to spend the rest of my life doing forest management, like, 20-year management plans up north. I came back to Toronto. I was trying to look for jobs that were tree related, and I got a contract with the city of Toronto as a Parks and Rec laborer. And that was basically planting trees and working nights, fertilizing trees on the main boulevard. And again,
Wow.
it was not my cup of tea. And then there was a posting for anybody in the city of Toronto for the first in-house training program to become a parks pruner. I had no idea what it was. I just wanted to get off working nights. So I signed up for it.
Okay.
I didn't even know there was a department that did, pruning of trees, honestly.
Wow.
So I
Wow.
saw
What were you doing? Okay, go ahead.
So,
Go ahead.
you're in a group with, lawn cutters, people from sanitation, just a motley crew of people. And you sign up for it, and then you have to pass a fitness test. And the fitness test, we were in, if anybody's familiar with Toronto, there's a park called High Park, and
Yeah.
they had this gorgeous white oak, And all you had to do was they supplied a belt, a harness, is just to belay yourself. That was about 30, 35 feet, hand over hand. You're on
Yeah.
belay. And if you got to the top, you qualified for the program. So I think I was one of the first to get to the top. And they said, "Oh,
Wow.
do you want to go higher?" Because I think they set the line like, maybe I'm going to say 45 feet, but you only had to
Yeah.
climb to whatever. So then they said, "Oh, we're going to make sure you can, if you want to go up higher." So they sent another climber up there to make sure it was okay, like, to escort me up there. And then when I got there, like, fireworks, rainbow, unicorn explosions hit me. And I said, "Holy, this is what I am meant to do." I had an
Wow.
epiphany, and I knew instantly, I'm going to spend the rest of my life. This is my life's vocation as a tree worker.
Wow.
And that's it.
Yep. You know, it's not very often, and so far in all the podcasts we've done, I haven't heard someone describe the moment when they knew like that. And I had the same thing happen when I knew I wanted to be a teacher, because I had taught off-campus course. I was asked to teach. I'd graduated from college, and I did finish this class, and I remember, I don't know if it was the student reviews or it was something about it. I had that epiphany. It was just like you said, fireworks, whatever. It was like that. There was nothing going to stand in the way of me getting hired as an instructor at Olds College. Like, it was like, that's what I'm going to do.
Yeah.
And I did it. Like, there was just nothing was going to stop me. And when you just described that feeling, it is a powerful thing, isn't it? You
Yeah.
just know.
And then when you say that to some people, and then especially when I'm talking to students, and they said, "Yeah, but what does that feel like? Like, how do you know?" It's like, you will know. And
Oh yeah.
it's like something rips into your soul and shouts down
Yeah.
your throat, "This is it."
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you have no choice. And it's
No.
so, it's grounding, and you feel
Yeah.
like, if this was written into the stars, you've just answered
Yeah.
the calling, and it's up to you to figure it out and
Yeah.
to work through whatever you need to do it.
It's fascinating, and when I had to apply 4 times for the job that I wanted, I kept getting not hired. I would be told no. And it just dawned on me, like your story, it wasn't easy. You had that epiphany, but man, for it to come true, and you had to work for it.
Oh yeah.
So, like, I mean, it's quite a story about how, I'm just curious how in the context of this, like, it never, it was so powerful feeling, and you remained undaunted through several, not just discriminations, but, well, probably that was probably the biggest thing, I would say, wouldn't you say, was the discriminatory factor?
Oh yeah. So it's one thing to, because it was a 6 week program. You had to pass like every week, whether it's using a chainsaw on a tree, climbing, limb walking, and then at the end, whoever was left over, there was the main test, the tree climbing, and you had to uh, rig a piece or whatever. And there was only 6 full-time positions, but there was more than
Wow.
6 people. So you still had to fight to get like the highest grade, so to speak.
Yeah.
And that's how I became the first female tree climber for the city of Toronto. That was in 1992. The training started in 91, so I usually say, 92.
Yeah.
So everything was great, but then you're literally thrown into the wolves, because up until that point, it was just, a guys' club.
Yeah.
And these were rough guys. A lot of these guys had barely finished high school, grade 10 education, but they started, literally when they were like 18, and they've been doing it
Yeah.
for 10, 15, 20 years, but they had absolutely no, like if you were to ask them about compartmentalization, they didn't know anything about that, but they were good at
Right.
climbing. And if someone said, you need to take this limb off, they could execute that. So then here
Right.
I come. I'm having to, downplay my education. I'm an Asian woman. I'm like, these guys were just like, just a rough bunch.
Yeah.
And to be thrown into that, meanwhile, I'm ecstatic. I got in with the city. And there's a disparity because, part of you're so excited and you want to learn, but then you find out nobody wants to work with you. They don't want to, you're rocking the boat because now they have to behave, so to speak, because there's a woman. They've never worked with a woman, let alone an Asian woman. So it comes with their own, you know, stereotypes. Oh, she's petite, she's shy, she's delicate, she's whatever. So
Yeah.
then it, at the beginning it was fine. Um, I was just like one of the guys, but eventually I realized they had a poll to see how long I would last. They would send me up these like, huge oaks, very little coaching or instruction, or even if I had to
Yeah.
do like a fruit tree pruning or whatever. And it's like, well, what am I doing? And they would just say, oh, you got to ball it. Well, what the hell does that mean? And they just said, well, just do it. And then everybody's just watching you and judging you. So it just
Right.
kept on going and going. And long story short, it just got worse because uh, it's at first they're judging you because you're too slow. So then, of course,
Right.
I'm just trying to um, get my skill levels really quick. So I would always volunteer. Okay, I'll do that. I'll do that. Or I'd be watching, and it didn't matter if my tendonitis, my carpal tunnel was in agony. You just had to do it. I had to survive, essentially, in that environment. And they're stealing from your equipment locker. You got graffiti, there'd be jeers, people either ignore you, um, nobody wants to work with you, so I'm put on the hydro crew doing line clearing. And then I was shuffled to different yards because nobody wanted to work with me. When they sweeping the whole garage, all the garbage would be piled in front of my equipment locker. And, after a while, you just really get exhausted. I'm trying to learn a
Yeah.
skill and I'm dealing with a bunch of hooligans.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I don't know how I survived 5 years.
Wow. 5 years of it. I, I, it's difficult to relate because, the parts you can kind of relate to because I think most of us, especially from the 80s, 70s, 80s generation, 90s even, you know, tree care was, we were joking the other day with someone about like 3 points of contact was the, how important that was to have to cut. That meant like a hand and your feet were on a branch, you could work, regardless of whether you had your belt on. But that was very damn important, and there was a lot of bravado and like, this, being told almost like you were given your test before your lesson, like this expectation of like, well, if they're any good, they'll just make it through. But I can't imagine, what it would have been because I think a lot of tree guys and people can experience that, but not the extra added bonus of, and I don't, bonus might be the wrong word, but extra discriminatory fact of you know, I don't think there was any women practicing arboriculture at that time. You're definitely in the first, you know, I'm sure there was a few here and there, but it was such a minority and such a male dominated industry and such a, you know, that style of, you know, it just speaks to your tenaciousness and your, you know, your commitment to what you knew as your calling. And, you know, I it's really great that you can speak about it and talk about it because I think it still exists, unfortunately. You know, and I think the more that it gets spoke of, the more people, particularly arborist males, can maybe say, "Hey, have I ever done that? And what can I do to not be like that?" And break that cycle. You know, break that mentality of, you know, it's almost like a hazing process that could take on a real ugly tone when there's a female involved, you know?
Yeah.
And that's what I think you went through. And, you know, I'm sure you learned some things out of it, but, you know, what, you know, if you can, I don't know if it's possible. I don't know. I'm curious, you know, I guess I try to practice gratitude and you know think about things happening for a reason. Like, can you think back to what that did for you, you know, even though it was unfair, unjust, and totally wrong? What did it do anything for you, do you think?
Oh yeah, I'm full of gratitude because a lot of people will ask me, well, what would you have changed? And, like, what does that do to your psyche? Well, yeah, it did do, like, I ended up quitting only because I had an ulcer from all the stress and the anxiety.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
I had to, like, I was physically, emotionally, and mentally, like, sucked dry. And,
yeah,
but now looking back, my career like has been extraordinary. I've had opportunities beyond like I could ever imagine, from competing at the internationals to winning it, and all of those experiences in my early career like really tested me like hard as nails. I grew scales, I grew barbed wire, all of that. And it really tested like how much are you willing to sacrifice? But then at the same time, when you're so driven because you it's your it's your life. Um,
yeah,
I had a quote saying that the fire in me burned brighter than the fire around me. And that holds true. It's like my desire to be the best climber, the best person, was way more important than dealing with these honestly immature Neanderthals
yeah,
just being
yeah,
threatened by my presence and threatened by my abilities eventually. So as I look back now, all those people, maybe 20 years ago, I would have said, I hate them, I hate them. But now I see them, they were my teachers. They tested
mm,
me.
wow,
It gave me the strength to progress where I am. And I tell my story to inspire that, hey, if I can do it from, a suburbia growing up, I'm 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 only 5'1". I'm not like some, you know, big person, but I was able to do this. And, even doing the competitions, like my climbing
yeah,
style for a smaller woman, I think was eye-opening to, people in general, guys. And
yeah,
it's not just a white male dominated industry. And
right,
like there's I'm living in a bubble in Toronto. We're seeing lots of women of color, women of all races, all genders. It's not exclusive that you have
no,
to have your license to be a 6 foot whatever
yeah,
honking guy with muscles. And
yeah.
so
You've mentioned going on to meeting more women in the industry through the competition, and then also going to Hong Kong and meeting other Asian climbers there. Like, do you think that your experiences from the early times have made those times that much sweeter, or um, but even that doesn't even really matter. Just, I mean, there have been very inspiring stories of when you started to connect with other women arborists, and particularly I think it started at the comp.
Oh yeah, because I never had any female role models, female mentors. I had no idea where I was, uh, where my level of experience was, because I was always climbing with
Yeah,
guys, competing with guys. And then at the internationals, it was like, wow. And meeting like people from, Australia and Germany. Um, and then realizing where I was in the pack blew my mind. So, so yeah, that was all part of the, you know, those stepping stones. And then meeting women that, just inspired me and empowered me. It gave me more strength because I think they were on top of their game, but there was not a lot of women that they were working with as well. So going to compete at these internationals just once a year, meeting those women, it was so inspiring to me to continue
right.
on and to continue on with the competitions. Um, you speak of Hong Kong, that was profound. That was another, like, okay, you pass this test, we're going to throw you another bone. I had no expectations with that, and just seeing all these men and women, Asian women, and the fact that I can understand Cantonese. I just can't speak it because
Yeah,
my accent is just so frightening. It just brought it all back. It, in my talk, I talk about that ancestral void that I didn't know was missing until I experienced
right.
it. And it still gives me chills that I had that opportunity because they just saw me. Oh, it's a North American woman. She just so happens to be, her parents are from Hong Kong, but she's like totally, westernized, and she's a climber. So that's how they saw me, but I'm seeing, wow, look, all these uh, Chinese people, they're all climbing. And nobody's like,
Yeah,
they're not having to face discrimination, harassment, or anything like that. So it was sort of like
right.
this, this real mind thing with me, um, playing the opposite.
Yeah, well, it just makes me think of the whole human forest aspect, and that I think for a lot of us in this industry, or the human forest, it's more than just professional. Like, obviously you were there in a professional capacity teaching climbing or whatever. I think you were teaching climbing, but the impact that it has on us as people, and personally, you know, yeah, and you touch on it in your talk, and you referenced a couple times your talk. And those of you that, if you ever get a chance to out there listening to this, like, Wenda does go and speak at conference. She has a talk that she's put together that is really, when it was amazing, and just a really well done talk. And I hope that you get to speak it everywhere. But if you ever get a chance to listen to it, please take that opportunity. But what could you, how do you feel you would describe how the human forest has impacted you personally as well, like as a person in your life outside of trees? And for a lot of us, there isn't much necessarily of a life outside of trees, because trees are so much a part of our life. But how would you describe that that's impacted you being part of this human forest in all aspects of your life?
Well, I think that it goes back to that whole desire, that epiphany moment that I want to connect with trees for the rest of my life. And back then, I didn't know what that looked like. Connecting with trees was, okay, climbing trees. And then it grew to teaching homeowners about the value of their trees when I became a job estimator. And it wasn't about just selling a job, but selling information that this is not just a thing in their backyard causing shade. Um, and then it became, the tree factor became a sense of community once you start going to competitions or industry events. When you get a herd
Hmm.
of arborists, whether it's like at an annual conference, we're so passionate about just the tree itself. And we take that for granted because for years my spouse would be coming to the competitions, and she's not an arborist or anything, but she just felt so excluded. And even though we're not always talking about trees, but when you get a bunch of arborists, you can just feel that energy. We're so like the vibe, we're so grounded when we're with, because we're all about the trees. And
Right.
there's just a magic about that. And I think it's because the trees are a living, breathing entity. I
Yeah.
believe that the trees have soul, and the tree itself is attracting, is like, the central vortex that attracts people to it. And
Huh.
unlike any other trade, whether you're a, plumber, electrician, uh, even landscapers. And I have this interesting conversation with other landscapers. It's like, boy, you tree people are way more passionate than when you get a group of landscapers. And it's like, okay, yeah, plants and shrubs are live beings too, but we're talking about something that is like, can be hundreds of years old.
Hmm.
And that power, that energy is just, it just takes it to a different level. So I
Yeah.
think it's not about we going to the tree, but it's the trees that are acting as a magnet to attract people to it. And from that,
Huh.
I'm meeting
Wow.
people at conferences. I'm meeting people, through my talks. I'm doing career mentorship and connecting to those students who, yeah, I think I could do this. I'm transitioning from horticulture to, and there hasn't been a language or that I know of what it is. And it's this magical, powerful spark that transcends that, oh, it's a living, you know, uh, a living, growing piece of vegetation.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really neat way of looking at it. And I, I love that. Like that makes a lot of sense to me. And I like that the trees, really attract, those of us who are willing to connect to them. That's a really neat concept. So, they act as the filter, so to speak, to, because it's almost, and you hear it's not uncommon. I don't know if you've seen that Legends of Arboriculture little clip where Larry Hall, who speaks at the very end of it, and he says, I think that people that spend a decade or two in arboriculture, that something mystically happens, or something happens to them, he says, and it's imparted mystically by the trees.
Yeah,
Like that's the word he uses.
yeah,
And I think it truly is. And I also think the whole concept of living thing, it commands respect. And the oldest of living things on the planet, like not just, um, their size and mass in many cases. Well, in fact, interestingly enough, the oldest ones aren't that big. The oldest of the pines, from my understanding, some of the oldest are here in the Crow's Nest Pass, the limber pines that are 5 to 7,000 years old, and some are
yeah,
still alive,
yeah,
and their bones are still there for the rest of them. Like you can, you can walk up to these trunks of trees that are probably a foot and a half in diameter, and the trees are maybe the tallest is 30, 40 feet tall, but they are. alive and been alive like before the ice age, you know?
Yeah.
It's astonishing that they've survived. And how do you not have a connection with that or an honor for that? Like, and maybe, I like we said, I think that's really cool, given by the tree for those of us that maybe are in the place in life or whatever to hear it, because it doesn't hit everybody, right? Which we can't understand, because it does connect with us, you know, and that's really amazing. You know, and Soul, I don't know, I think I may have told you, like, Shigo, Dr. Shigo and Jack Phillips were looking at they were in the middle of writing a book called The Soul of a Tree.
Hmm.
And unfortunately they didn't finish it because Shigo passed away. But the whole concept was that trees have, what is it about trees that connect us? And that gives them soul, the way you listen to a song that moves you or food that comforts you. Trees have that effect on people, and they were attempting to describe that and talk about that. And I think that's kind of what you're touching on here. Oh, my dog wants to say hi. So interesting. You know, and talking about Celeste and her not like feeling somewhat left out at a tree event. I can, you know, I've heard that too, you know, from those close to me and from Nance, you know, like they just don't have they don't have the same connection for whatever reason. You know, what do you think it is that some of us get that and some of us don't? That's something I can't put my finger on. It's just a gift, I guess.
I don't know. Shigo always says touch trees, and
Yeah.
maybe if you haven't touched and really connected, it doesn't grab you in. I had a conversation not too long ago, and I can't remember who it was, and I was just saying that, um, oh, that Japanese guy who did all those water experiments. Is it Emoto Matsu? The, he would have a glass of water and he would write, like, the word love or peace, and then he would take a eyedropper of the water from that glass of water and put it under a microscope, and the water crystals would be this beautiful, you know, pattern. But then with that
Wow.
same glass of water, if he put a piece of tape and put the word hatred, war, anger, and then took an eyedropper of water and under a microscope, the crystallization of the water droplets, it would reflect, like, it would be sharp and prickly. And so we're like, everybody knows we're all made up of, like, was it 90% water, liquid. Same with trees, same with animals. And we emit this vibrational frequency that, it's like the frequency of our attraction sort of, they
Yeah.
speak to each other. And
Right.
it's that's
Interesting.
that's the soul speak. It's funny because
Yeah.
women, we can talk about, like, I've, throughout my career, we'd have these conversations about this spiritual connection with trees. But with guys, like, no, 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 we don't want to talk about spiritual this. But
Huh.
they'll say, man, that climb was just awesome. Everything just vibed. It just clicked. I was just in sync. I was, like, in the zone. So it's just the application of language. And I find that, with guys,
Wow.
they'll use that, but with women, we'll say, yeah, that grounded me. I was connected. You
Yep.
know, it was a spiritual experience. Same
Yeah.
same
Well done. And
feeling, just different words applied.
well, I think there is truth to that, and that, you know, I think well, you can get pretty deep in here, but I'll go there anyway. You know, I think a lot of the feminine um, resonance or vibration of femininity in humanity, you know, I think it was stifled by, you know, just certain, uh, I don't know, power and control of, the development of mankind, I suppose you could say. I don't know where it started from exactly, but, I think, there used to be the term goddess, and even in worship and in ancient cultures that, somehow through, I don't know, in the last 500 years or so has changed. It went far more masculine, and we lost that connection even for healing, for the natural herbs, like what, wise women of the woods, like, which got termed as witches or blamed for things that were it just took away from all of that side of things that, you know, I don't, that women never disconnected from because it was inherently part of them. But as men, we weren't, I think of myself, like you weren't taught it. You didn't learn it. You weren't exposed to it. So you didn't even know what you didn't know. And I think there's a bit of a coming back to that, you know, at least in my life, there's been that, and, thanks to some significant women that I've had and had in my life. And I mean, like yourself, like, completely. And there's you can learn to appreciate, which I think everyone's had the capability of, even going all the way back to your experience in Toronto. Like, that's an evidence of that disconnect that occurred, where particularly men lost the ability to connect with the feminine side of themselves even.
Yes.
And it needs to come back for true healing of not just, tree people, but the planet, I think, to be honest. And I mean, I know we're getting it, but hey, we don't have rules on this podcast. We don't have boundaries, and I'm glad for it, but, and the more we have ears to hear and are open to listen and be sensitive to that, because I think it's there, for me. And for me, my recovery has been a big part of that. My journey through recovering from alcoholism and addiction I've had to learn to be more open to the spiritual side of things in order for my own healing to occur. And that's really all it takes, is openness and honesty and willingness to hear. And it can change and open up so much, and I think that's a very wise observation that you've made there about that. And yeah, I can see that. Like, I would love to have been a fly on the wall listening to a women's only group talk about their experience in a climber in a tree. It would be very different, I think.
Well, I think the bar has been raised with so many educational, um, you know, Old College in Ontario. We had Sir Sanford Fleming and Humber College. So you get,
Yeah.
you're still getting about 10% women in the class, but at least the men in the class, they're all at the same level. They're all learning from scratch how to
Yeah.
climb. And a lot of times those women are just seen as another student. And
Mhm.
then, they're going into the workforce, and a lot of them are, lots of students are getting hired, and it's diluting the old boys club now.
Hmm.
So,
Hmm.
like, especially in the Toronto GTA area, I don't like, most companies have at least one woman. And if you don't,
Hmm.
then it's like, really? Come on, it's, 2023. You don't even have a woman? You've never had a woman? So it's gone that, uh, you know, in that direction, which I think, like, wow, this is great. Um, Something that I don't know why I'm thinking of this, but since doing my talk, and I'm having more men come up to me sharing the experience, like, just recently, how they've been harassed at a company
Ah,
because they're educated, they're finding,
yeah.
showing them, oh, well, we can do it this way. And I'm finding it, wow. Like, before, it was like to share with other women because, like, I know where you're coming from, but I'm getting, like, I never would expect guys saying, well, I'm also getting a hard time
Yeah.
because of the, whatever the environment. that's in.
Yeah,
And I find, that I think my message is universal. It's not just for women.
I agree. And there is a shift in that too. There's more education overall taking place. And I think we're at a crossroads or a transition in the industry where, there is like by no means has it completely changed. And I think, when anyone listening to this could say, oh man, it's still like that at my company. Cause I think a lot of like that's just a long-term legacy that was there. Uh, you know, I was trained to, you put the saddle on, you put the lanyard on, and you climb to the top. Even getting a ladder was like, you're kind of lame. Like you shinnied or you got a boost. Like you climb literally up someone's back and you'd stand on their shoulders, jump to the first branch and then climb the tree. Like you need to get a ladder, really. Like, but sometimes it was just too high. So then you had to, and then climb all the way up, and it just was this real weird bravado. And I, you buy into it, you're trained into it, and it takes a long time for that to change. And I think it's in that we're in a real flux mode of that now. And you have some companies that are quite different like they've changed a lot. It's not even an issue like it is. And there's some companies where it still hasn't changed hardly at all, and that's something I always, when people ask about where to go work and so on, that's one of the things you got to look for, and you can find better places, but sometimes you just made a bad choice, and you'll know, soon on into it I guess the real company culture is. I think that's what it boils down to. What's the real culture of the organization, right? And they're not all the companies have embraced, this new model of inclusion and let's try new things, be open to, like, there's still companies that never do a tailboard. They just don't. And I mean, Tony, I think it's perhaps, I don't know if it's different in Canada and the US, but I always called it when I would train down in the States, I'd always call it the land of the free and the brave, like, PPE was a little less stringent than it is in Canada and less legislated. We have that advantage, I think, in some cases here. But what do you think, Tony?
Yeah, I think, when I do work and train up in Canada, it's a higher percentage of women in the workforce overall than here in the States, just across the board. But I've seen it growing, almost exponentially. 15 years ago would have been unheard of to have a woman on the workforce in the States here. It would have been really, really exceptional. And it probably would have, and you would have stereotyped them and said, oh, you must be doing plant healthcare. You would have just assumed they weren't a climber.
Yeah.
But that's really starting to change, and it's starting to change. I mean, for a number of reasons. I think the climate competitions were a huge part of it here in the States. And just so for all the listeners that don't know, Wenda was the second women's champion ever in 2002. Yeah. You were actually the first Canadian champion ever.
Yes.
You were the first North American women's champion ever. I just want to make sure everyone understands how you're blazing a trail here. And I wanted to make you blush too. But no, but because of that, I think that especially here in the States, the women getting involved in the competition starting in 2001, and how many competitors were there, Wenda? Probably six women competed roughly.
Yeah.
Ish.
And I was surprised because in the US, there's so many chapters. And then at the internationals, like there only be a few, like no more than 3 women from the States.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I've seen that change, over the years to be much more representative. And I think too, talking about the education part of it, I think that's changed too. Like, tree care demands more of an education to do it. 'Cause really, quite honestly, just about anybody can learn how to cut down a tree. In fact, now when it comes to mechanization and the amount of equipment we have at our disposal, tree removal is really not a hands-on, not saying that it's not difficult work, but sometimes it's not as complex as it used to be. But caring for trees, pruning for trees still takes an artistic sense. It still takes a scientific sense. You still have to know where to make the cut, how to make the cut. And those things I think are getting much more important because, like I said, it's getting easier and easier to get into the into the workforce or get into the business, in the industry, have a whole bunch of equipment to cut down trees. But it's a bad business model because you can't ever work on that tree again. So I think that it's starting to change that way too. And education is playing a bigger role, which is, I think, evening the field, for, highly educated people from all over, men, women, all over, to be able to get into it never really changed for me until Dr. Coder told me once, we were talking about tree removals, and he said, Tony, if you want to take a tree down, at least take it down the way it was put together. And it really kind of changed the way I looked at work. And I needed, at that point, I knew that I needed to understand more about trees, and even in removals, to understand how to get down safely with dignity for them, but then also safely and some dignity for myself as well. Cause anyone can cut down a tree, we can go on YouTube and watch it all the time. It'll hit the ground eventually. It's, can you do it? Can you do it safely for the tree? Can you do it safely for the environment? And I think there's a certain amount of dignity that should go into a tree removal, because nothing lives forever. We're all ephemeral, but we all want to go out with a little bit of class. And I think that can be part of it too.
I think I just want to go back to when you were talking about the competitions. Yes, the competitions to me were allowing women to compete, letting women compete at the internationals was the single most significant thing that basically put us on the map. It celebrated not only our presence, but it validated that women can climb, because that's like 2001. I remember when Sharon Lilly came to Toronto, and I was, still working at the city, and she was the first woman I ever met that was a climber. And I remember her saying, like, yeah, I'm not that great in throwing my line in. And I said, oh my God, that's like me. But when you own the company, you just have someone else throw your line in. But anyways, I remember at one point I asked her, are there women that compete? And she goes, oh, no. But I think there's like a few in Sweden that, they want a competition. And it took almost 7 years, closer to almost 9 years into my career, that the international said, yep, this is it. We're going to let women. And even then, that 2001 event, that competition was such a disappointment, because women were treated like, we only had 3 events. That was the Belayed Speed Climb, throw line, and footlocking.
The work one. Really?
Those were the 3, and the top 3 of the combined points, you went and you did the Masters, which was basically the men's work climb. Because and I remember Rip saying, well, because some of the women were saying, I traveled all the way from Europe to do these 3 events. Are you kidding me? And they didn't think women were capable of doing aerial rescue. That's, that was no. And the work climb was just too advanced. So that became the Masters, in that first year. So I had already convinced myself, I was crappy at throw line. I was, I didn't know what a footlock at the internationals. And I ended up coming 3rd. So I remember, they were calling my name. I was going to do the Masters, the work climb. And it was Christine Inch, Kia Martin, and I. And I ended up winning that. But they took the collective points, so I came in 2nd.
You would have won. That's how Christine won. Oh, okay.
So the next year, it was I think there was enough, complaints. It's okay, we'll let the women do all those events in their own Masters, but they're going to get separate trees. They still weren't sure. The guys, the committee, they still weren't sure. So now we're not even 25 years from, that first event, and everything is like completely even. Same time, men and women are given the same time, the same trees, and women are
Yeah.
beating the men's times.
Yeah. 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 I know. I think it's come an amazingly long way.
But if it
you
wasn't
know,
for that competition, allowing women to showcase our abilities, I think we wouldn't be having this conversation.
maybe, I have to say, I can't, I need to fact check the year, but I am factual on one aspect. We had 7 women compete in our chapter event. Now I need to remember if I don't know what restrictions there were. It's possible because, the way, wasn't an automatically, yeah, let's let the women do everything, which is just ridiculous when they look at it now. Uh, um, but we had, it's been touted at the international, they'll announce that the first time there was ever women in a comp was in a chapter in Minnesota or something. It was a year or 2 years previous that we had 7 women compete in our chapter. And, I was already involved with the international. And I remember saying, like, you guys need to start having some, because there was nowhere for them to go. Like, we were having women in our event and we didn't have, like, there was nowhere for them to go. They couldn't go compete at the international. And that hasn't always been the case. Like, we've gone from having as many as 10 down to 2 or 3. But there was a time when we had, like, I think 10 or 12 women in our chapter competition before the international started having theirs.
Wow.
And other chapters started as well, right? And it's interesting because I'd like to get you our conference this summer, because the city of Red Deer is hosting it. And the city of Red Deer, last time I trained there, had all women urban forestry crew. And it might be the only place that exists that has all women. Like, I'm talking the entire, it's a small city, so there's only 8 or 9 of them. It's not like the city of Red Deer is 150,000 people, so it's a decent city. But the entire urban forestry crew from top to bottom, like from the people feeding the chipper to the people cutting the trees to the climbers, the bucket operators, and the urban forest manager are all women.
Wow. That's great.
And they would love to. I don't know if any of them met you. They've definitely heard of you. So anyway, I digress. It's interesting though because a woman by the name of Donna Bolzer, she pushed the city into starting an urban forest position. I want to say 1985. And she was instrumental in having Nelda Matheny come up and speak in '87, the late '80s, on the hazard evaluation book that first came out, in '87, '88. The photographic guide, hazard trees in urban areas, and she was very vocal. And I remember I was hired at the college in '92, and she wanted an aerial rescue workshop done at the city, and it was for her and Linda, her coworker, which were the arborists for the city of Red Deer, and it was actually Lori and I went up, and we did a little air rescue thing on a weekend on a Saturday, and this was like the mid '90s, early mid '90s, and she'd been in that position, but what I guess what I find fascinating is like her dedication to it has kept that city very much on the forefront, and to this day it's just not even an issue. Like,
Mm-hmm.
women are a part of that crew and always will be, I think. So yeah, and I also think back to California with the Shady Ladies, as they call themselves, which started as a group of wives of arborists that went to the conference. And now they're all made up of women that are, practicing agriculture. They're not just, it was, and that group is still in existence today and goes way back. I don't know if you're familiar with them, Wenda,
No.
but, they still do, they're still active in the chapter. They have their own little event they do at their conference every year. and they go back, my goodness, I'm not sure how long, but it's into the 70s.
Wow.
Yeah, I know. So, but it's just growing and growing, and igniting, and it's just getting so much more in the forefront. And yeah, I just find it really interesting, and
Wenda, where
I
do
don't know,
you
just really healing.
Wenda, where do you see the future of the women's competition going? Do you think there'll be a point where there won't be a separate men's and women's division? It'll just be a tree climbers competition?
Ooh, that's a good one. I'm not sure. It just seems like, there's like now you're getting intergenerational, climbers coming up. Um, I don't know. I think there always going to be that difference of men and women's. I can't think of any sport where it's like,
Correct.
in the Olympics where they don't
Yeah.
separate that. And I'd rather see it, the women's, because it's like, I don't follow any sports, but man, when the women's soccer is there or women's hockey, I'm in front of the TV. Like
Right.
I think
Right. Well, I think go ahead.
the only thing I can see is that you're going to need an extra day, because more and more women are competing, like from the
Mm,
chapters. Even at our
yeah.
the Ontario chapter, like we have a waiting list, and it's been mentioned, like, for the last couple of years, we have to add another day onto our competition to allow, let's say, if you want, like, 20 women competing, or whatever. So,
Yep. I think that if you didn't keep it separate, I think there's a chance for the identity to get lost again. It potentially, it created, like you just said, Wenda, like you watch the women's hockey, you watch the women's soccer, like it's in all sport and all things, there is, and tree climbing competitions cross that vague line of work to sport. It's not really work. It's based on work activities, but it's not. I don't know many. Like I don't know if there's the international plumbing championships or the international. You know what I mean? But we are this weird industry that has these and it's very much a sporting event. I mean, I'm curious what you feel like. What was her name? The English? No, was she? We had there was a female competitor who was not an arborist who did very well in competitions. Who was that now?
uh,
Do you remember?
was she the trapezist from the UK
No,
chapter?
I thought she worked. Yeah, she worked at a bank. Like but she was very fit and active. Um,
I
Tony,
think,
do you remember who that was?
If you said the name, I'd probably remember, but I don't.
there's been a few of them, and I spoke to one, and she's actually an American. Anyways, I'm not going to say the name, but anyways, she was saying that um, she she was just a good athlete, and she felt
Right,
bad she was not an arborist, but she stopped
right.
competing and went back to the drawing board to become an arborist. So now it's that
Oh wow.
line where, just
Mhm.
similar to what you were saying, like, if you're a good athlete and you can train on this, but you don't have to do this day in and day out, sure, you can be good at doing all these events. You may not know any idea why you're doing it, but it's
Right.
just repetition. It's just like, writing your ISA certification. There's like, lots of people now that they're not arborists, and they're able to write it.
My goodness, are you saying that if you're a certified arborist, that doesn't mean you know a lot about trees, Wenda?
It's possible.
So in Hong Kong, they call them paper arborists. And those are
Really?
paper arborists. And those are the ones that are in managerial, they work in management. They don't climb,
Right.
they're not frontline, but they got the smarts, and they can memorize anything that you put in front of them. They may have
Right.
zero practical knowledge, but they literally are called paper arborists.
Interesting. So that would, like, the direct translation, so to speak, is paper arborist.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, and I mean, I think we're all aware of it. It's I guess fundamentally, if we want to talk about the ISA and certified arborist a little bit, and the competition often comes up, but I don't think we've talked about certified arborist yet, or the other type of disciplines that exist. I think there was such a lack of recognition for arborists that ISA really has bolstered that and created an identity that is very important. I think overall, I think that's been a positive. You know, the only misgiving I think I have with the programs that have been developed is when uh, a group like a municipality or an organization says, in order to bid or to be part of our crews, you need to have certified arborists on staff, let's say. And, there was a situation here where a company had, three people that had forestry degrees. They had the other four people had diplomas, or like arborist diplomas, like from Humber College or Olds College, but they just hadn't written their certified arborist, and they weren't able to bid on a contract because they didn't have. And a company that got the contract, all they had were CAs. They had no other training whatsoever, just written the arborist test, but they were eligible to bid. And this company owner wrote an article about it in our newsletter saying, like, is this really what we're after here? This seems a little wrong because there's no way you can hold a certified arborist exam up against a forestry degree or a 2-year college diploma. Like, come on. But yet it's easy. And everyone argues, well, of course, just go write the test. I get that. However, it has given some power or recognition to a paper credential. I guess I would use that term based on what you just said, Wenda.
Yeah.
What do you think? Is that, like, have you observed that or witnessed that?
What we have seen, especially in, Toronto, more and more landscape architects are certified arborists. So now they don't need somebody like myself to do a construction tree preservation plan. So talk about conflict of interest. I'm going to put it out there. Not all of them, but a lot of landscape architects, they have no clue. They have no clue about proper, tree selection. They put in like $1 million planting plans, and it makes absolutely no sense because it's a disposable plan. It's not meant to last for more than, 10, 15 years. And we as the arborists, we have to come in years later to take down these trees or to, who the heck planted this close? Doesn't make sense. And I think we go back to that passion, when you're a climber and you're an arborist, a certified arborist, and you're trying to educate the builder or the architect, like, you don't need to remove this 100-year-old bur oak for this addition. We're like the last totem on the totem pole. And we're just so invalidated for our credentials. So now these architects are just writing the exam, and then they can write their own specs without any desire to maintain the trees or really understand that you don't need to remove this tree. We can cut this back. We can do all this stuff. So there's my thing with paper arborists.
Right. Yeah. Well, I think you'd find a resounding agreement amongst a lot of, I don't know what we'd be called. What would be the opposite of that, Wenda? What if they're paper arborists? What's the what are we?
Wooden arborists.
But I mean, I get it. I understand totally what you're saying, and I agree.
We're the frontline workers. We're the ones that are going to chain ourselves to that tree or put up a tree tent and stay up there fighting for the tree.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's funny, like when you look back at like what the certified arborist program we know today came from. Like here in the Pennsylvania Delaware chapter, my father, Pendel chapter, had a certified arborist program predating the international. I believe Western chapter did as well. A lot of the chapters did. Yeah. And they actually used pieces of the Pendel chapter, to do the international. But part of that was like, there was a test and you had to sit down and take a test. But then you also, like, you did tree identification in person. Somebody took you through the woods and you identified trees and they ask you questions and there was a review process. And I think that ultimately, the international might find themselves getting back to that, just to differentiate, because I know plenty of people that are like, I call them research arborists, right? Like they're excellent certified arborists. They can explain things about trees that go right over my head, but they don't climb trees every day, but they're still arborists. They're still actively involved in the pursuit of, caring for trees and learning about trees. And that's great. And that's, I get, if a landscape architect wants to be a certified arborist, that's great. But you're right. It loses something when they're not working with trees every day, when they're not doing these things. And even when you classify down into municipal arborists and line clearance arborists, and you could go, there's a whole nother rabbit hole to dive down. But I think that ultimately the program is going to have to come back around, because it doesn't mean what it used to anymore, because you can't just go take a test. And if you're good at taking a test, you have the same certification that the three of us have, minus the probably well over 100 years of experience, working with trees. And that's a huge part of it. And so I think ultimately the program might have to go back to something like that. And it was always been my biggest argument about board certified arborist is, where's the board? Like it's only in the name. Like, where'd the board go? So maybe that's what it needs to come down to, to differentiate that, so that you can, because, all those years climbing trees, working in trees, being with trees, it's paid dividends in education, physically and, emotionally and spiritually, as we talked about earlier. And that has value.
Yeah.
Well put.
Yeah, it certainly does. Well, Wenda, we don't have a set timeline. We get to about 70 minutes, and which we're close to now, and it seems like I don't know, it must be a biorhythm thing or something. But and then we want to thank you very much for your time. It's the most valuable non-renewable resource that we all have. And I'm just honored and grateful that you were willing to do this, and that we were able to record this and have some of this posterity down on an audio format that, and I hope you catch your episode will air sometime
April, looking like late April, I think, if I was just working on a calendar today. So sometime in late April, I think. And,
but, what would you have to say? Tony, I'm going to ask what you'd tell someone, that's just, that thinks they've felt the calling. First of all, they'll probably know it. What's the advice you'd give someone to moving forward in this, if they feel they've been bitten by the tree bug?
Sorry, you're asking me? I thought you were asking Tony.
Yeah. No. I was asking you, Wenda.
Well, if they're in Toronto, they should go through the ground worker program. Go through the tree, like, go to the college. I think it's old school thinking that you can just get hired off the street. 30 years ago, you can just walk up to a company and say, listen, I'll drag brush. But most of the companies, they're going to hire from the school.
Right.
But that calling, that bug, there's no way to articulate that. It's like it's going to grab you from the guts. And at that point, you're so focused, nothing is going to get in your way. You're just going to, and that's the only way I think I lasted And perhaps that's probably why a lot of women are scared to, like, back then, to get into the program, to get into being a climber, because of that. It's just so male dominated. But if you,
Yeah.
and you need that spark, it's like a soul spark, the fireworks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I agree. And and I guess it's a gift when you receive it. And I can't even put my finger on, like, for myself. I wasn't looking for it. I didn't know that's what it would be, but I knew it was it when I felt it. It was there. It was, and how it happened to be that I received that gift, I don't know, but I ran with it. I took it, and I guess I was open to pursuing it. And it didn't, like, same as you, it took a relentless effort of disappointments and rejections before, before I really felt that I'd arrived there. And I've never deviated. I've never left the arboriculture industry and the training side of it. It's just always was in me. And, I admire your journey. You're one of my most favorite arborists and people to talk to. Always, Wenda, I mean it. It's always just so, I guess, just meaningful and uplifting. So I just want to thank you again for taking time and for being and answering the questions. It was fun.
Yeah. Thank you so much. I have one last question for you, Wenda. If you could have your own billboard, what would it say?
Oh my goodness. I would have to put like it's you know what? I would have to quote, I have arrived. I'm at home, from, Faye, the honorable,
Mm-hmm.
Thich Nhat Hanh. It's just being present and being in gratitude. That quote always surrounds my whole being. That every day is a gift, and no matter where you are in that that transformation and that journey, that is where you're supposed to be.
Right.
I have arrived. I am at home at this very instance. This is where I'm supposed to be.
That's very beautiful.
Be where your feet are. Very
Wow.
good.
Well, I think that's a great ending to an amazing podcast. Thank you, Wenda.
Well, thank
thanks,
you
Wenda, so
both.
much.
This was great. I didn't expect to have such a great, we just talked wherever we wanted to talk. There's no script.
No.
I didn't have to bring my musical stand with 17 pages of notes.
No. And, go ahead, John.
I said there's a time and place for that, but not here.
Yeah. And if you're ever interested, in, we're not sure where this thing's going to go. We're open to whatever. And if there's ever a time that it might happen again, we'd love to have you back. So if you're open to that, maybe one day we'll do it again.
Absolutely, I'm all for it.
Right on.